3 years ago. They took my twin boys from me. Not strangers. Not the system. My husband, his mother, his entire family. They stood in a courtroom while a judge read from a file full of lies, claims that I was unstable, unfit, unsafe, and not one of them spoke up. Not one of them hesitated. They didn't just let it happen. They made sure it happened. And just like that, I lost Mark and Ethan. Tonight, I walked into a luxury restaurant in downtown Chicago and saw them again. My sons weren't there. Of course they weren't. But the people who replaced me were... My mother-in-law, Tiffany, sat at the head of the table like she owned the world. Next to her, Courtney, the woman who stepped into my life like I had never existed, was laughing, wearing confidence that didn't belong to her. My ex-husband, Christian, didn't even look surprised to see me. They thought I came here to beg, to apologize, to accept whatever pieces of my life they were willing to give back. So I smiled, because what they didn't know was that this dinner wasn't theirs. It was mine. And before the night was over, everything they had built on lies was going to start falling apart. I stepped out of the car and the cold Chicago air hit my face like a warning. For a moment, I stood there, staring at the glowing glass entrance of the restaurant, watching silhouettes move behind it, people laughing, celebrating, living lives untouched by betrayal. I adjusted my coat, steadying my breathing. I had imagined this moment so many times that it almost didn't feel real anymore. Every step, every word, every expression, I had rehearsed it all. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew I wouldn't get a second chance. Inside, the restaurant was warm, golden light reflecting off crystal glasses and polished surfaces. The soft hum of conversation filled the space, broken occasionally by laughter or the clink of silverware. It felt like a place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. That illusion almost made me laugh. I spotted them immediately. They hadn't even tried to hide. Tiffany sat at the head of the table, perfectly composed, like she had been waiting for this exact moment. Her posture was straight, her expression calm, her eyes sharp. Next to her, Courtney leaned slightly toward Christian, laughing at something he said, her hand resting casually near his arm like she belonged there. Like she had always belonged there. Jennifer sat across from them, scrolling on her phone, barely looking up. Her disinterest almost more insulting than anything else. And Christian, he looked exactly the same. Confident, controlled, untouchable. For a second, my chest tightened. Because for a second, I saw the life I used to have. Then I saw the empty spaces around the table. No small chairs. No scattered toys. No sign of Mark or Ethan. And just like that, the feeling was gone. I walked toward them slowly. Each step measured, deliberate, my heels made soft, steady sounds against the floor. But to me, they felt louder than anything else in the room. No one stood when I reached the table. That didn't surprise me. Tiffany looked up first, her expression neutral, almost polite, but there was no warmth in it. Not even an attempt. "Amber," she said, like she was acknowledging a distant acquaintance. Courtney followed with a small, tight smile. "It's been a while." Jennifer barely glanced up before returning to her phone. Christian leaned back in his chair, studying me for a moment, his eyes scanning my face like he was trying to measure something. "You made it," he said simply. No apology, no hesitation, just confirmation. I nodded once and took the empty seat at the far end of the table, the one they had clearly chosen for me. The edge, the outside, exactly where they believed I belonged. A waiter approached, but Tiffany lifted her hand slightly before he could speak. "We're not ready yet," she said, not even looking at me. I noticed everything. The wine already poured, the plates arranged, the ease in their movements. This was their world now, and they had made sure I knew it. So, Tiffany began, folding her hands neatly in front of her. "How have you been?" The question sounded polite. It wasn't Courtney let out a soft laugh before I could answer. It's been 3 years. I hope things have stabilized for you. Jennifer smirked faintly. Some people just take longer to figure things out. Christian didn't smile, but there was something in his expression, something cold, something final. I think we all know why we're here, he said. I didn't respond. I just watched them. Tiffany reached into her bag and placed a folder on the table with deliberate care. The sound of it touching the surface felt heavier than it should have. We wanted to handle this properly, she said. For everyone's sake. She slid the folder toward me. I didn't touch it. You've had time, she continued. More than enough time to move on. This is your chance to make things official. Courtney leaned slightly forward, her voice softer now. Almost sympathetic, but not quite. It's better this way, she said. For the boys. The boys. Mark and Ethan. My hands remained still in my lap. Jennifer added, without even looking at me, you can finally start over. Clean slate? Christian's voice came last. It's the best option, he said. For everyone involved. I looked down at the folder. Then slowly, I looked back up at them. They were all watching me now. Waiting. Expecting something. A reaction. A breakdown. A plea. Instead, I smiled. Not wide. Not obvious. Just enough. And in that moment, something shifted. Because for the first time that night, they didn't look completely certain anymore. I didn't come here to give anything up, I said quietly. I didn't realize I was walking into a trap the morning they took my sons. It started like any other day. Mark woke first, as usual, his small hands pressing against my shoulder, his soft voice whispering my name. Ethan followed a few minutes later, louder, impatient, already demanding breakfast before his feet even hit the floor. For a moment, everything was normal. The sunlight filtered through the curtains, the apartment warm and quiet except for their voices. I remember thinking how peaceful it felt. How ordinary. I didn't know it was the last morning I would ever have with them like that. Christian was already dressed when I walked into the kitchen. His tie half knotted, his expression unreadable. That should have been my first warning. He was always rushed in the mornings, always distracted. But that day, he was too calm. Big day, I asked, pouring cereal into 2 small bowls. Something like that, he said, not looking at me. He checked his phone more than once. Short messages, quick replies. His movements were precise, controlled, like he was waiting for something. I told myself I was imagining it. I had learned, over time, not to question things too much, not to push when something felt off. It was easier that way. Quieter. But something in my chest tightened anyway. Then the doorbell rang. Tiffany never came over unannounced. I remember wiping my hands on a towel as I walked to the door, already trying to prepare myself for whatever version of her I was about to get that day. Warm and smiling, or cold and critical. When I opened the door, she stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Amber, she said, her tone pleasant, almost too pleasant. We need to talk. Christian appeared behind me almost immediately, like he had been expecting her. That was my second warning. What's going on? I asked, looking between them. Tiffany smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Why don't we sit down? I glanced back toward the kitchen. Mark was trying to pour his own milk and Ethan was laughing at him. I'm in the middle of... It won't take long. Christian interrupted. Something in his voice made me stop. We sat at the table. Or rather, they sat across from me. That's how it felt. Tiffany folded her hands neatly, like she had practiced what she was about to say. Amber, she began, we're concerned about you. The words hit me like a small shock. Concerned, I repeated. Christian nodded slowly, his eyes still avoiding mine. You've been under a lot of stress. I let out a short laugh. Confused? Of course I have. We have 2 toddlers. That's not exactly unusual. Tiffany tilted her head slightly. It's more than that. What are you talking about? She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. I remember staring at it. The way my stomach dropped before I even knew why. "This is an evaluation," she said, sliding it across the table. I didn't touch it. "What kind of evaluation?" Christian finally looked at me then. "A psychological one." I blinked. "I've never had a psychological evaluation." Tiffany's smile didn't change. "According to this, you have." The room felt smaller. "That's not possible," I said, my voice sharper now. "I would know if I had seen a doctor." Christian leaned forward slightly. "Amber, you've been overwhelmed. Maybe you don't remember everything clearly." Something inside me snapped. "I know what I remember," I said. "And I've never—" There was a knock at the door. Not the doorbell this time. A firm, deliberate knock. Christian stood before I could move. "I'll get it." When he opened the door, a man stepped inside. Suit. Briefcase. Calm. Professional. Our family lawyer. The same man who had helped us with paperwork before. The same man I had trusted. "Good morning," he said. Like this was just another routine visit. My chest tightened. "Why is he here?" I asked. No one answered me directly. Instead, the lawyer set his briefcase on the table and began pulling out documents. "Amber," he said, his tone careful, measured. "We're here to discuss temporary custody arrangements." The words didn't make sense at first. Temporary custodies of what? Christian's silence was louder than anything he could have said. "Of the children," the lawyer replied. I laughed again, but it came out wrong this time. "That's not funny." "It's not meant to be," Tiffany said softly. I pushed my chair back slightly. "This is insane." The lawyer continued as if I hadn't spoken. "Based on the evaluation and supporting documentation, there is concern regarding your ability to provide a stable environment at this time." My ears rang. "No," I said. "No? That's not true. This is wrong." "You know it's wrong." I looked at Christian. He didn't move. "Say something," I demanded. "Tell them this is wrong." He exhaled slowly. "This is for their safety." Something inside me broke. "For their safety," I repeated. "From what?" Neither of them answered. Instead, Tiffany stood. "I'll get the boys," she said. "No," I said immediately, standing up too. "You're not taking them anywhere." But she was already moving. Mark looked up when she entered the kitchen, confused but smiling. "Grandma?" he said. She picked him up like it was nothing, like he wasn't mine. "Wait," I said, stepping forward. "Put him down." Christian moved then, not toward me, between me and them. Ethan started crying when Christian lifted him. "Mommy?" he said, reaching for me. I tried to move around Christian, but he blocked me again. "Stop," he said, his voice low. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Harder. Harder than watching them take my children out of my arms. "Christian, please," I said, my voice breaking now. "You can't do this." He didn't look at me. They walked out. Just like that. No hesitation. No second thoughts. The door closed behind them, and the apartment fell silent. The lawyer gathered his papers slowly. "You'll receive official notice from the court," he said. I couldn't hear him anymore. I stood there, staring at the door, waiting for it to open again. It didn't. Days later, I stood in a courtroom, listening as that same file was read out loud. Words that didn't belong to me. Diagnoses that weren't mine. A version of me I didn't recognize. I tried to speak, but every time I did, I was interrupted, redirected, silenced. "She is emotionally unstable. She requires evaluation. It is in the best interest of the children. Temporary custody." That's what they called it. Temporary? But as I stood there, watching the judge sign the order, something in me understood the truth. There was nothing temporary about what they had done. When I got back to the apartment that night, it was quiet. Too quiet. The toys were still on the floor. their cups still on the table. A blanket still folded on the couch where we had sat together just hours before. Everything was there, except them. I sat down slowly, staring at the space where they should have been. And for the first time, through the grief and the shock and the silence, I started to realize something didn't add up. Something in that room had been planned. And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't about concern. It was about control. They thought I disappeared after that. In a way, I did. For the first few weeks, I barely left the apartment. The silence pressed in from every corner, heavy and suffocating. Their toys were still where they had left them. A small blue car under the couch. A stuffed bear on the edge of Mark's bed. 2 cups on the counter I couldn't bring myself to wash. I stopped answering calls. Not that there were many. The few people who reached out didn't stay long once they heard the story. Once they heard I had lost custody. Once they heard I was not well. That word spread fast. Unstable. It followed me everywhere. Neighbors stopped making eye contact. Conversations cut short when I entered a room. Even the grocery store felt different. Like I didn't belong there anymore. They didn't just take my children. They erased me. At first, I tried to fight it the way anyone would. I called Christian, over and over again. No answer. I left messages. No response. I contacted Tiffany. Blocked. Even the lawyer who had stood in my apartment that day stopped returning my calls. It was like I had been sealed out of my own life. Weeks passed. Then months. Grief settled into something quieter. Not gone. Never gone. But deeper. Colder. And underneath it, something else began to grow. Questions. I started replaying that morning in my head. Every word. Every movement. Every look. Christian's calm. Tiffany arriving without warning. The lawyer already prepared. It had all happened too fast. Too smoothly. That's when the thought first crossed my mind. This wasn't sudden. It was planned. I didn't act on it immediately. At first, it felt like desperation, like I was searching for something to hold on to. But the more I thought about it, the more certain I became. So I went back to the only thing I still had. The documents. The court file they had sent me was sitting in a drawer I hadn't touched since the hearing. I remember staring at it for a long time before finally pulling it out. My hands shaking as I opened it. Page by page. I forced myself to read. The evaluation report. The statements. The timeline. At first, it all looked official. Clean. Structured. Like something that couldn't be questioned. But then I started noticing small things. A date that didn't match where I had been. A time that overlapped with something else entirely. A name I didn't recognize. I went back to the evaluation report. The doctor's name was printed clearly at the top. I had never met that doctor. Never spoken to them. Never even heard of them. My chest tightened. I reached for my laptop and searched for the name. Nothing. I tried again. Different variations. Different spellings. Still nothing. No office. No license. No record. It didn't make sense. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, my thoughts racing. If the doctor didn't exist, then the report didn't either. And if the report didn't exist, then the entire case was built on something that wasn't real. That was the moment everything changed. Grief didn't disappear, but it shifted. It sharpened. I wasn't just a woman who had lost her children anymore. I was someone who had been lied to. I started looking deeper. I went through every page of the file again. Slower this time. More carefully. I wrote down dates, times, names. I built a timeline. And the more I looked, the more the cracks started to show. The evaluation had supposedly happened on a day I had spent entirely at home with the boys. There were messages on my phone. Photos. Timestamps. Proof. The filing had been rushed through faster than normal procedures allowed. Too fast. Almost like someone didn't want it examined too closely. I didn't understand all of it yet. But I understood enough. This wasn't an accident. It was a system. And systems could be broken. That was when I reached out for help. At first, I didn't know where to go. Lawyers I contacted either didn't respond or told me the same thing. Cases like this were difficult, expensive, unlikely to succeed. One of them told me to focus on moving forward. I hung up before he finished. I wasn't looking to move forward. I was looking to go back. Eventually, I found someone willing to listen. Not to promise anything, just to listen. I laid everything out. The documents, the inconsistencies, the timeline I had built. He didn't say much at first. Just flipped through the pages. Quietly. Then he stopped. Right at the evaluation. He tapped the page once. This, he said slowly. This doesn't look right. My heart started pounding. What does that mean? I asked. It means, he said, leaning back slightly. There's enough here to start asking questions. Questions. That was all I needed. From that point on, everything changed. I stopped trying to prove I was a good mother. I started trying to prove they had lied. I went back through my own records. Bank statements, emails, messages, anything that could show what had really happened. And that's when I found something else. Transactions. Small at first, then larger. Money moving between accounts I recognized, and some I didn't. Dates that lined up with the custody filing. Patterns that didn't make sense. I stared at the screen, my breath slowing, my mind sharpening. They hadn't just prepared a story. They had prepared everything. The case. The timing. The money behind it. I wasn't looking at a mistake. I was looking at a plan. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel helpless. I felt focused. I closed my laptop slowly, my reflection staring back at me in the dark screen. They thought I was broken. They thought I would disappear. They thought I would accept what they had done. They were wrong. Because now, I knew where to start, and I wasn't going to stop until I had everything they took from me back. The question I asked didn't come from anger. It came from certainty. Christian, are you absolutely sure everything you filed to take my children was legal? For a split second, the table went quiet. Then Courtney laughed. Not a nervous laugh. A confident one. Like I had just said something ridiculous. Oh my God, she said, shaking her head. We're still doing this. Jennifer smirked without even looking up. 3 years later and you're still stuck there. That's kinda sad. Christian leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. Like I was an inconvenience he had already dealt with. You really haven't moved on. Have you? He said. Tiffany didn't laugh. She didn't interrupt either. She just watched me, carefully. That was the first thing I noticed. You asked me to come here, I said calmly. So let's talk. Tiffany straightened slightly, reclaiming control of the moment. This isn't what we're here for, she said. We're here to resolve things properly. She gestured toward the folder in front of me, the one they wanted me to sign. We're giving you an opportunity. An opportunity. I almost smiled again. To give up my rights. I asked. To move forward? She corrected smoothly. I didn't look at the folder. Instead, I reached into my bag. Slowly. Deliberately. I felt their attention shift the moment I placed my own folder on the table. It wasn't thick. It didn't need to be. What is that? Christian asked. His tone already tighter than before. Something I should have looked at a long time ago. I said. Tiffany's voice sharpened slightly. Amber, this isn't the place for... I opened the folder. And just like that, she stopped talking. I slid the first document across the table, turning it so it faced them. The evaluation, I said. Christian didn't touch it, but his eyes moved over it quickly. Tiffany's gaze dropped to the page. Her expression controlled, but not as controlled as before. You remember this? I continued. The report that proved I was unfit. Courtney leaned forward slightly, curiosity flickering through her confidence. Jennifer finally looked up. It's part of the case, Tiffany said. We've already been through this. Have we? I asked quietly. I tapped the top of the page. Because I don't remember ever meeting this doctor. Christian's jaw tightened. You were under stress, he said. You might not remember everything clearly. I nodded slowly. That's what you said back then, too. I reached for another sheet. This evaluation, I continued, was supposedly conducted on a Tuesday morning. I looked directly at him. Do you remember where I was that morning? He didn't answer. Of course he didn't. I was home, I said. With Mark and Ethan. All day. Jennifer shifted in her seat. Courtney glanced at Christian. Tiffany's fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the table. That doesn't prove anything, she said. It proves the timeline doesn't exist, I replied. I pulled out another page and placed it beside the first. I checked. I continued. The doctor listed here. There's no active license under that name. No registered office. No record of practice in this state. Courtney's smile faded. What? She said quietly. Christian leaned forward now, his voice lower, more aggressive. You're twisting things you don't understand. I didn't even look at him. I understand numbers, I said. And timelines. I tapped the documents again. And these don't match reality. Tiffany spoke quickly, trying to regain control. This is a misunderstanding, she said. There are always discrepancies in documentation. No, I cut in, still calm. There aren't. That stopped her. For a moment, no one said anything. The air felt heavier now, different. Jennifer looked between the pages, her confidence slipping just enough to notice. Courtney leaned back slightly, her posture no longer relaxed. Christian's expression had changed too. It wasn't confidence anymore. It was irritation. And something else? Something closer to concern. You're reaching, he said finally. This doesn't change anything. I let the silence stretch. Then I placed another document on top. This is just the beginning, I said. Tiffany's eyes flicked to it. What else did you bring? She asked, her voice tighter now. I met her gaze. Enough. Christian shook his head, trying to push the moment back into something he could control. This is pointless, he said. We're not going to sit here while you already are, I said quietly. That shut him up. I leaned back slightly in my chair, my hands resting calmly on the table. 3 years ago, I had sat in a room like this, different table, different people, and tried to explain myself, tried to defend myself, tried to be heard. It hadn't mattered then, because I didn't have anything they couldn't ignore. But this time was different. This time, I didn't need them to believe me. I just needed them to listen long enough to realize what was coming. Tiffany exhaled slowly, her composure slipping just enough to show, You're making a mistake, she said. I tilted my head slightly. No, I said. You did. Christian stared at me now, really stared, trying to figure something out, trying to understand what had changed. And for the first time that night, he couldn't. I leaned forward just enough to hold his gaze. The report was fake, I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. And that means everything built on it is illegal. The word hung in the air. Illegal. No one moved. No one spoke. And in that silence, I saw it. Not confidence. Not control. Fear. For the first time in 3 years, they were the ones realizing something didn't add up. And they had no idea how much worse it was about to get. The word illegal didn't fade. It stayed there, hanging over the table like something none of them could push away. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Tiffany let out a short, controlled breath, the kind she used when she was about to take control of a situation. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice firm again, though not as steady as before. You're misinterpreting documents you don't fully understand. Christian nodded quickly, grabbing onto her words. Exactly, he said. You're pulling things out of context. That report was handled through proper channels. I didn't respond right away. I just watched them. 3 years ago, I would have rushed to explain myself, tried to fill the silence, tried to prove something. Not anymore. Then you won't mind if we go through it? I said calmly. Tiffany's expression tightened. This isn't the place for... It wasn't the place 3 years ago either, I interrupted softly. But that didn't stop you. That landed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But enough. I reached into my folder again and pulled out another set of documents, sliding them across the table with the same deliberate movement as before. This is a request I submitted 6 months ago, I said. Verification of the medical report. Christian didn't touch it. Tiffany glanced at it briefly, then looked back at me. And, she asked. And this is the response. I placed a second page beside it. No licensed practitioner under that name performed any evaluation tied to my case. I said, no affiliated clinic. No record. Courtney leaned forward again, slower this time. What does that mean? She asked. It means the report shouldn't exist, I replied. Christian scoffed, but it sounded forced. That doesn't prove anything, he said. Clerical errors happen? I nodded slightly. They do, I agreed. But not like this. I tapped the page again. This wasn't a typo. This was a fabrication. Jennifer shifted in her seat, her earlier indifference gone. You're saying someone made it up? She asked. I turned my eyes to her briefly. I'm saying it didn't come from any real doctor, I said. And yet it was used to take my children. The table went quiet again. Tiffany leaned forward slightly, her voice lower now, more controlled. Amber, she said, you're letting your emotions distort reality. I almost smiled. I'm not the one bringing emotions into this, I said. I'm bringing evidence. Christian's patience snapped just enough to show. You don't know how these processes work, he said. There are intermediaries, third parties. You're not seeing the full picture. I am, I said calmly. That's the problem. He opened his mouth to respond, then stopped, because he didn't have anything concrete to say. I pulled out another document. This is the filing timeline, I said. From the court. I slid it forward. The report was submitted and approved in less than 48 hours. Jennifer frowned. That's fast, right? She asked, looking at Tiffany. It depends, Tiffany said quickly. Emergency cases can be expedited. Emergency, I repeated softly. I looked at Christian. What was the emergency? He didn't answer. Of course he didn't. There wasn't one, I said. The words settled into the space between us. Nothing happened, I continued. No incident. No report. No complaint. Just a file that appeared. And a decision that followed. Courtney sat back slowly, her earlier confidence slipping further. This doesn't make sense, she murmured. No, I said. It doesn't. Tiffany straightened, her voice sharper now. This is pointless, she said. Even if there were irregularities, it doesn't change the outcome. The court made its decision. I looked at her, really looked at her. And what happens? I asked quietly. When the decision is based on something that never existed, that stopped her. Not completely, but enough. Christian pushed his chair back slightly, his frustration now visible. This is going nowhere, he said. You're trying to reopen something that's already settled. Is it? I asked. He hesitated. Just for a second. But it was there. I reached for one more document. This is the original signature on the report, I said, pointing to it. And this, I placed another page beside it, is a verified sample of the same doctor's signature from a separate case. Jennifer leaned closer. They don't match, she said quietly. No, I said. They don't. Christian's face hardened. That doesn't prove... It proves enough. I cut in, my voice still steady. Silence followed again. He looked at the papers. Then at me, then back at the papers. And this time, there was no confidence left in his expression. Only calculation. Tiffany tried to recover. You're building assumptions, she said. That's not how the legal system works. I leaned back slightly. No, I said. It's exactly how it works. I let the moment stretch. Then I placed one final sheet on top of the stack. This is just the legal side, I said. Christian's eyes flicked to it, then back to me. What does that mean? He asked. I held his gaze. It means we haven't even started talking about the money yet. And that was the moment everything shifted. Not slowly, not subtly, but completely. Because this time, he didn't interrupt. He didn't argue. He just stared at me. And for the first time since I walked into that restaurant, I saw it clearly. Fear. The moment I said the word money, something inside Christian changed. Not on the surface. Not enough for anyone else to immediately notice. But I saw it. A flicker. A hesitation. A calculation that hadn't been there before. This has nothing to do with finances, he said quickly, his voice sharper than before. You're reaching. I didn't respond to the tone. I responded to the timing. It has everything to do with it, I said calmly. I reached into my bag again and pulled out a second folder. Thicker this time. Heavier. I placed it in the center of the table with a soft, controlled movement. No one touched it. But everyone looked. This, I said. Opening it is what happened in the weeks leading up to the custody filing. I slid the first page toward them. A clean spreadsheet. Dates aligned in a column. Numbers highlighted. Joint account activity. I explained. Christian leaned forward despite himself. Just a little. Enough. There's nothing unusual about that, he said. We moved money all the time. Not like this, I replied. I tapped a line. 3 days before the filing, a large withdrawal. Another tap. 2 days later, another. I flipped the page. And then the account was closed. Jennifer leaned closer, squinting at the numbers. That's a lot, she said quietly. Courtney's eyes moved between the pages and Christian's face. What is she talking about? She asked. Christian exhaled. Trying to regain control. It's normal financial restructuring, he said. You wouldn't understand. I understand patterns, I said. I slid another sheet forward. These transfers didn't just leave the account. They moved somewhere specific. Tiffany's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the table. Amber, she said, her tone lower now. More controlled. This is inappropriate. No, I said. What you did was inappropriate. That landed harder. I pointed to a series of transactions. New accounts opened within days. I continued. Different names. Different routing paths. Christian's jaw tightened. You're misreading that, he said. I'm not, I replied. I looked directly at him. I've been reading numbers my entire career. Silence. Heavy. Pressing. Courtney shifted in her seat. Her earlier confidence gone. Christian, she said softly. What is she talking about? He didn't look at her. That was all the answer she needed. I flipped to the next page. And then there's this, I said. I pushed the paper forward. Her name was on it. Courtney. She froze. What is that? She asked. A financial link, I said. Assets registered under your name. Her head snapped toward Christian. What? It's nothing, he said quickly. It's just paperwork. It's not nothing, I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. These accounts received transfers from the original joint account. I continued. And then those funds were moved again. Courtney's face drained of color. She started. I didn't agree to anything like that. Christian finally turned to her. It's fine, he said. It's just structuring. Structuring what? She asked. He didn't answer. I let the silence stretch just long enough. Then I spoke again. Your primary account was flagged this afternoon, I said. Christian went still. Completely still. What? He said. I watched him carefully. The bank flagged irregular activity. I continued. Multiple transfers. Inconsistent reporting. Linked accounts. That's not possible. he said immediately. His hand moved to his phone before he could stop himself. Right on cue. It buzzed. The sound cut through the air like something sharp. He looked at the screen. And everything changed. His expression didn't collapse all at once. It cracked. First confusion. Then disbelief. Then something darker. What is it? Jennifer asked. He didn't answer. Courtney leaned forward. Christian, she said, her voice tight. What is it? He swallowed. My card was declined earlier, he said, almost to himself. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Tiffany spoke quickly, trying to regain control. That happens sometimes, she said. It doesn't mean anything. But her voice lacked conviction now. Christian looked up at me. This is you, he said. Not a question. An accusation. I met his gaze. No, I said calmly. This is what you did. His breathing had changed. Faster. Less controlled. I pointed to the documents again. These transactions triggered a review, I said. And once that review started, everything connected to it came under scrutiny. Courtney leaned back in her chair, her hands shaking slightly. You said everything was handled, she whispered to him. You said it was clean. Christian didn't respond. He couldn't. Because for the first time, the situation wasn't something he could talk his way out of. It wasn't about confidence anymore. It was about facts. And facts didn't care how convincing you sounded. I leaned back slightly, watching them. 3 years ago, I had sat in a room and listened to them decide my future like I wasn't even there. Now they were sitting across from me, and realizing they had never been as untouchable as they thought. This isn't just about suspicious transfers, I said quietly. Christian's eyes snapped back to mine. A flicker of something deeper now. Fear. It's about where that money actually went. No one spoke. No one moved. And in that silence, he knew. Because whatever he had done, he knew I was about to say it out loud. Christian didn't ask me to stop. He didn't tell me I was wrong. He just stared at me, like he was trying to figure out how much I knew. That was all the answer I needed. Do you want me to say it? I asked quietly. Or do you want to pretend a little longer? Tiffany inhaled sharply. That's enough, she said. This is getting out of hand. No, I replied, my voice steady. It's finally making sense. I turned to the next page in the folder. After the funds left our joint account, I continued. They didn't disappear. They were redirected. I tapped a highlighted section. Layered through multiple accounts. Broken into smaller transfers. Then moved again. Jennifer frowned. Why would someone do that? I didn't answer her. I looked at Christian. He didn't speak either. Because he already knew. That's not restructuring, I said softly. That's concealment. Courtney shook her head slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. No, that's not what you told me. Christian exhaled sharply. You don't understand how this works. Then explain it, she said, her tone rising. Explain it right now. He couldn't. I slid another document forward. These accounts, I said, were opened within 48 hours of each other. I pointed to the names. Some in your name, Courtney. Some linked through business entities. Some routed through third-party intermediaries. Her face went pale. I didn't open those, she said. You signed paperwork, I replied. You just didn't know what it was for. She looked at Christian again, panic creeping into her voice. What did you do? Nothing illegal, he snapped. It's just asset protection. Asset protection from what? I asked. He didn't answer. I leaned forward slightly. From a custody battle you knew you couldn't win without lying, I continued. Or from the money you knew would raise questions if anyone looked too closely. That's not what happened, he said. But his voice didn't sound certain anymore. It sounded defensive. And that was new. For 3 years, I said. You believed no one would look. I let that sit. You thought the story was enough. Tiffany slammed her hand lightly against the table. "This is speculation," she said. "You're making accusations without proof." I turned my eyes to her. "Everything I've shown you is proof," I said calmly. Her lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time, she didn't have a response ready. The silence stretched again, heavier this time. Then Courtney spoke. "Why is my name on those accounts?" she asked. No one answered her. Not Tiffany. Not Christian. That was worse than anything they could have said. She laughed once, short and hollow. "You told me it was just paperwork," she said to him. "You told me it was routine." Christian rubbed his temple, his composure slipping further. "It is routine," he said. But even he didn't sound convinced. "No," I said quietly. "It's not." I pointed to another line. "These transfers triggered a compliance review," I continued. "Multiple flags. Inconsistent reporting. Irregular patterns." Jennifer leaned closer, her earlier sarcasm gone completely. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means the system noticed," I said. "And once it notices, it doesn't stop looking." Christian's fingers tightened around his phone. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said. "I know enough," I replied. I watched him carefully, watched the way his breathing had changed, watched the way he avoided certain documents, watched the way his confidence had completely disappeared. "Your accounts were already flagged," I said. His head snapped up. "That's not... It happened this afternoon," I continued. "Right before I got here." He stared at me. Then slowly, like he didn't want to, he looked down at his phone again. Another notification. Another confirmation. This time, he didn't try to hide it. His face said everything. Courtney saw it. Jennifer saw it. Even Tiffany saw it. "What's going on?" Jennifer asked, her voice shaking now. Christian didn't answer. He couldn't, because whatever he had told them wasn't holding up anymore. "This isn't just about numbers," I said. No one interrupted me. "Not this time. It's about intent," I continued. "About why the money moved when it did. About what you were trying to hide." Tiffany shook her head, but there was no strength behind it. "This is absurd," she said. But it didn't sound like she believed it anymore. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence settle over them. 3 years ago, they had watched me fall apart. They had watched me try to defend myself, knowing I had nothing strong enough to fight them. Now they were the ones sitting there, realizing they had underestimated me completely. "This isn't even the worst part," I said quietly. Christian looked up, slowly, carefully, because he already knew what was coming. "It's not about how the money moved," I said. "It's about where it ended up." No one spoke. No one breathed. And in that moment, the fear in his eyes wasn't subtle anymore. It was real. Because he knew exactly what I was about to expose next. They were waiting for me to finish. But I didn't. Not yet. I let the silence stretch just long enough to settle into their nerves. Long enough for doubt to start turning into something heavier. Fear. Christian shifted in his seat, trying to gather himself again. "You're not making any sense," he said. But his voice had lost its edge. "You're connecting things that aren't connected." I didn't respond. Instead, I glanced toward the entrance of the restaurant. Just for a second. That was enough. "What are you doing?" Tiffany asked, her tone sharp again, but thinner now. I turned back slowly. "Waiting." I said. "For what?" Jennifer asked. I didn't answer her. "Because I didn't need to." The sound of the door opening behind me cut through the air. Not loud. Not dramatic. But it was enough to shift everything. I saw it in their faces before I even turned. Jennifer looked first, her brows pulling together in confusion. Courtney followed, her eyes narrowing slightly as she tried to figure out what was happening. Christian turned last, and when he did, something in his expression changed again. Recognition. Not complete, but enough to make him uncomfortable. I didn't move. I didn't turn immediately. I just let them watch. Let them feel it. Then I slowly shifted in my seat. A man was walking toward our table. He wasn't rushing. He didn't need to. His steps were steady, measured, like he knew exactly where he was going and why. Dark suit, clean lines, nothing flashy. But there was something about him, something that didn't belong in a situation like this. Not family, not casual, something else, something official. Courtney leaned slightly toward Christian, her voice low. "Do you know him?" Christian didn't answer. Tiffany's eyes narrowed, her posture straightening as she tried to assess the situation. Jennifer looked between all of us, confusion turning into unease. The man stopped beside me, close enough that I could feel the shift in the air. Then, without hesitation, he placed a hand lightly on the back of my chair. "Sorry I'm late, Amber," he said calmly. His voice was steady, controlled, the kind of voice that didn't ask for attention, but got it anyway. No one spoke. No one moved. For a moment, the entire table just stared. I looked up at him, meeting his gaze for a brief second. No surprise, no hesitation, just acknowledgement. "You're right on time," I said. That was when it hit them. Whatever this was, it wasn't random. Christian leaned forward slightly, his voice tight. "What is this?" The man turned his attention to him. Not rushed, not aggressive, just direct. "My name is Daniel Reeves," he said. "I represent Amber." The words landed harder than anything I had said so far, because they didn't sound like part of a conversation. They sounded like the beginning of something else, something official. Tiffany straightened completely now, her tone sharpening as she tried to take control again. "This is a private family matter," she said. "There's no need for outside involvement." Daniel didn't even look at her. "With respect," he said calmly. "This stopped being a family matter a long time ago." That shut her up. Completely. Courtney's eyes moved quickly between all of us, her earlier confidence gone. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice no longer steady. No one answered her, because no one could. Christian's attention snapped back to me. "You brought a lawyer," he said, disbelief creeping into his voice. I didn't answer immediately. I just held his gaze. Then I spoke. "You thought I came here alone?" I asked quietly. That was the moment something inside him shifted again. Because for the first time, he wasn't sure what he was dealing with anymore. Daniel reached into his briefcase and placed a folder on the table. Not the same kind of folder I had. This one was different. Thicker. Heavier. Final. "We've already initiated formal proceedings this morning," he said. His tone didn't change. Didn't rise. Didn't hesitate. But every word carried weight. Tiffany's composure cracked just enough to show. "What proceedings?" she demanded. Daniel finally looked at her, and for the first time that night, she looked uncertain. "Multiple," he said simply. That was all. No explanation. No elaboration. Just enough to make it clear this wasn't something they could dismiss. Jennifer's hands tightened in her lap. Courtney leaned back, her breathing uneven now. Christian stared at the folder like it might disappear if he didn't acknowledge it. But it didn't. It stayed right there. Real? Unavoidable. I watched them. Every reaction. Every shift. For 3 years. They had controlled everything. The story, the narrative, the outcome. But now, they weren't controlling anything. They were reacting, and that was exactly where I needed them. I leaned forward slightly, my voice calm, steady. "You thought this dinner was about closing something," I said. Christian looked at me, slowly, carefully, like he was trying to understand what I meant. I held his gaze. "It's not..." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, final. Because deep down, he already knew. Everything he had built was about to fall apart, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. No one touched the folder Daniel placed on the table. It sat there between us like something alive, something none of them wanted to get too close to. Christian stared at it, his expression tight. Controlled, but barely. "What proceedings?" he asked again, his voice lower now, more careful. Daniel didn't rush to answer. He opened the folder slowly, deliberately, as if every movement mattered. "Let's start with the custody filing," he said. The words were simple, but the tone behind them wasn't. "This petition," he continued, pulling out a document, "was supported by a medical evaluation that does not exist in any licensed database." Tiffany leaned forward immediately. "That's already been addressed," she said. "There are discrepancies sometimes." "This is not a discrepancy," Daniel said calmly, cutting through her without raising his voice. "This is fabrication." The word landed harder coming from him. "Not emotional. Not personal. Official." Christian's jaw tightened. "You can't prove that," he said. Daniel slid another document across the table. "Verification requests have already been processed," he said. "There is no record of the physician listed. No license. No affiliated practice." Courtney looked down at the page, her hands moving closer to it, like she couldn't stop herself. "Then, how did it get into the case?" she asked quietly. Daniel's eyes flicked briefly toward Christian. "That's exactly what we intend to determine," he said. The silence that followed was different from before. Heavier. Because now it wasn't just me saying it. It was being stated as fact. Jennifer shifted in her seat, her voice barely above a whisper. "So, the whole thing was fake." No one answered her. Not directly. Daniel moved on. "Beyond the medical report," he said, "there are irregularities in the filing process itself." He placed another page down. "The case was approved in an unusually expedited time frame. Standard review procedures appear to have been bypassed." Tiffany shook her head quickly. "That doesn't mean anything," she said. "Emergency cases—" "This was not classified as an emergency," Daniel replied. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. Christian leaned forward, his tone sharpening again. But the confidence wasn't there anymore. "You're making assumptions," he said. "There are always procedural variations." Daniel looked at him. Not aggressively, just directly. "These are not variations," he said. "They are deviations." Christian didn't respond. "Because there was nothing left to argue with," Daniel continued. "And now we move to the financial aspect." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Christian's eyes flicked toward me, then back to Daniel. "What financial aspect?" he asked. But even he sounded like he didn't want the answer. Daniel placed a new set of documents on the table. "Multiple accounts were opened within a short time frame prior to the custody filing," he said. "Funds were transferred, layered, and redirected." Courtney's breath caught. Her name was visible on one of the pages. "Why is my name on that?" she asked, her voice unsteady. Daniel didn't soften his tone. "Because certain assets were registered under your identity," he said. She shook her head immediately. "No, I didn't open anything like that." Christian finally turned to her. "It's fine," he said. It's not fine." She cut in, her voice rising. "Why is my name on this?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Daniel stepped in before the silence could stretch too long. "These accounts are linked to the original joint account shared by you and Amber," he said, looking at Christian. "Transfers were made prior to the legal filing and continued afterward." Jennifer looked between them, her face pale. "Why would you move money like that?" she asked. Christian exhaled sharply. "It's called financial planning," he said. "No," Daniel replied. "It's called concealment." The word hit harder this time, because now it wasn't just a possibility, it was a conclusion. Tiffany's voice came out tight, controlled, but strained. "You're overstepping," she said. "This is still a private matter." Daniel didn't even look at her. "No," he said. "It isn't." That ended it. Completely. Courtney leaned back in her chair, her hands trembling slightly now. "You told me everything was clean," she said to Christian. "I said it was handled," he replied. That's not the same thing, she whispered. He didn't respond. Because he couldn't fix it anymore. Not with words. Not with confidence. Daniel closed the folder slowly. This is what has been identified so far, he said. So far. The words echoed. Because they meant there was more. Christian's voice came out lower now. Almost controlled again, but thinner. What happens next? He asked. Daniel looked at him. And for the first time that night, Christian didn't look like the man who had walked into that restaurant. He looked like someone who had just realized how much he had lost control. That depends, Daniel said, on how this proceeds. Not a threat. Not a warning. Just a fact. I watched them. All of them. Tiffany, who couldn't command the room anymore. Jennifer, who didn't know where to look. Courtney, who was starting to understand what she had been pulled into. And Christian, who finally understood that this wasn't something he could talk his way out of. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to, because the truth was already there. Laid out. Unavoidable. And this wasn't even the end of it. Daniel placed his hand lightly on the folder again. And this, he said calmly, is only what we've uncovered so far. No one spoke. No one moved. And in that moment, they all realized the same thing. This wasn't damage control anymore. This was collapse. The moment Daniel said so far, something inside Christian snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But enough. He pushed his chair back suddenly, the legs scraping against the floor in a sharp, jarring sound that turned a few heads at nearby tables. This is harassment, he said, his voice rising. You don't just walk in here and start throwing accusations around. No one moved. Daniel didn't react. I didn't react. That made it worse. Christian looked around, as if expecting someone to step in. To interrupt. To stop what was happening. No one did. We're leaving, he said abruptly, reaching for his jacket. Tiffany stood halfway, her movements uncertain now. Yes, she said quickly. This is inappropriate. We're done here. They weren't. They just didn't know it yet. Christian took a step away from the table. And that's when the door opened again. This time, it wasn't quiet. Not loud. But deliberate? The kind of entrance that carries purpose. 3 men walked in. Not dressed like diners. Not part of the restaurant staff. Their presence cut through the room instantly. People noticed. Conversation slowed. Heads turned. Christian stopped. Just for a second. But that was enough. What is this? Jennifer whispered, her voice shaking. Courtney's hand gripped the edge of the table. Tiffany turned, her expression tightening as she tried to understand what she was seeing. The men moved calmly, directly. Toward us? Christian didn't move again. Not forward. Not back. He just stood there, waiting, hoping, maybe, that they would stop somewhere else. They didn't. They stopped right in front of him. Christian Hale, one of them said, his voice even, controlled. Christian swallowed. Yes. The man nodded slightly. We need you to come with us. Silence. Complete and total. There's been a mistake, Christian said quickly. I think you have the wrong person. The man didn't change expression. We don't? He said. Another step forward. Not aggressive, but final. Christian looked at Tiffany, then at me, then back at them. You can't just, he started. We can, the man interrupted calmly. There was no anger in his voice, no urgency, just certainty, and that was worse. Courtney stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. What's happening? She demanded. What is this about? No one answered her directly. Because they didn't need to, she already knew. Or at least, she was starting to. Christian's hands clenched at his sides. This is ridiculous, he said. I haven't done anything wrong. The man reached into his jacket and pulled something out. Paper. Official. Christian looked at it, and I watched his face change. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Confidence slipping. Control fading. Reality setting in. You need to come with us, the man repeated. Christian didn't argue this time. He couldn't. Because whatever he saw on that page, he understood it. Two of the men stepped closer, not grabbing him, not forcing him, but close enough that there was no question. This was happening. Right here. Right now. In the middle of the same restaurant where he had sat. Just minutes ago. Telling me I wasn't fit to be a mother. Courtney shook her head. Backing away slightly. No, she said. No, this doesn't make sense. Jennifer's breathing grew uneven. Oh my God, she whispered. Tiffany stepped forward, her voice rising in a way I had never heard before. There's been a misunderstanding, she said. You can't just take him like this. This is a private matter. It isn't. One of the men said simply, that was it. No explanation. No argument. Just the truth. And for the first time, Tiffany had nothing to say. Christian turned again. This time, his eyes landed on me. Not with anger. Not with arrogance. But with something else. Something closer to realization. You did this, he said. I held his gaze. I didn't, I replied quietly. You did? No, I said. You did. That was the last thing I said to him. Because after that, they took him. Not violently. Not dramatically. Just firmly. Decisively. He didn't resist. He couldn't. The room watched. Whispers spread. People trying to understand what they were seeing. The man who had walked in confident, untouchable, was now being let out like someone who had finally been caught. Courtney sank back into her chair, her hands covering her mouth. Jennifer stared. Frozen. Tiffany stood there, unmoving, her entire world shifting in front of her. And me? I stayed exactly where I was. I didn't stand. I didn't follow. I didn't say another word. Because I had already said everything that mattered. The door closed behind them. And just like that, the noise returned. The restaurant resumed. But our table didn't. Nothing about it was the same anymore. I looked down at the empty space where Christian had been sitting. Then slowly, I stood up. Every eye at the table turned to me, waiting. For what? I wasn't sure. Maybe they expected anger. Or satisfaction. Or something louder. They didn't get it. This isn't the end, I said calmly. My voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. I looked at each of them, one by one. And then I said the only thing that mattered. We're not done yet. No one spoke after he was taken. The space he left behind at the table felt larger than it should have been. Like something had been ripped out and nothing could fill it again. The restaurant slowly returned to its rhythm. Glasses clinked. Conversations resumed. A server passed by as if nothing had happened. But at our table, everything had changed. Tiffany sat frozen, her hands resting on the table. Fingers slightly curled like she didn't know what to do with them anymore. Jennifer stared at the empty chair, her eyes wide, unfocused. Courtney didn't move at all. Her shoulders were stiff, her breathing uneven, like she was trying to hold herself together and failing. And me? I stood there. For a moment, I just looked at them. 3 years ago, I had been the one sitting there, lost, confused, trying to understand how my life had been taken from me so easily. Now they were the ones trying to understand. The difference was, I already knew. Tiffany was the first to move. Slowly, she stood up, smoothing her jacket like that could somehow restore what had just been shattered. Amber, she said, her voice tight but controlled. We need to talk. I didn't sit back down. I think we've already done enough talking, I replied. No, she said quickly, stepping closer. This isn't what it looks like. I almost smiled. It looks exactly like what it is, I said. Jennifer let out a shaky breath. What's going to happen? She asked. Her voice small, nothing like the sharp tone she had used earlier. No one answered her, because they already knew. Tiffany stepped closer again, her voice dropping. Softer now. We can fix this, she said. There's been a misunderstanding. These things happen, and we can resolve them privately. Privately. The word felt almost ironic. Like you resolved things 3 years ago, I asked quietly. She flinched. Just a little, but I saw it. That was different, she said quickly. We were trying to protect the boys. No, I said. You were protecting yourselves. The truth landed between us, heavier than anything else that had been said that night. Courtney finally moved, her hands dropping slowly into her lap. Is it true? She asked, her voice barely holding together. Everything she said, is it true? Tiffany didn't answer. Jennifer didn't answer. And Christian wasn't there to answer anymore. That silence was louder than anything. Courtney shook her head slowly, her expression collapsing. You told me everything was handled, she whispered to no one. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to, because she wasn't the one I came for. Tiffany was... She stepped closer again, desperation starting to break through the control she had held onto for so long. We're still family, she said. That word again. Family. I looked at her. Really looked at her. At the woman who had stood in a courtroom and watched me lose everything without a single moment of hesitation. At the woman who had called someone else the mother of my children while I was still breathing. We were never family, I said. Her face tightened. That's not true, she insisted. We just made mistakes. Mistakes. I let the word sit there for a moment. Then I shook my head. No, I said. You made choices. She didn't respond to that. Because she couldn't. I reached into my bag and pulled out one final document. Not the same kind as before. This one was different. I placed it gently on the table in front of her. She looked down at it, her eyes scanning the page. Then she froze. What is this? She asked, though her voice already knew. My children, I said. More specifically, my custody. The court reviewed the new evidence. I continued. Everything you built your case on is being re-examined. Jennifer leaned forward, her voice shaking. What does that mean? I didn't look at her. It means I get them back, I said. Silence. Complete. Absolute. Courtney's head snapped up. What? Tiffany's grip tightened on the paper, her hands trembling now. That's not possible, she said. You can't just... I can... I said. And for the first time that night, I didn't feel like I was taking something from them. I felt like I was taking something back. The court has already approved the reversal. I continued. Effective immediately. Jennifer covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. Courtney leaned back, stunned, like the ground had disappeared beneath her. And Tiffany looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Not as the woman she had dismissed, not as the one she had controlled, but as someone she no longer had power over. This isn't over, she said. But the words sounded weak now. No, I agreed. It isn't. I picked up my bag. For a moment, I just stood there, looking at her. 3 years. 3 years of silence, of loss, of being told I wasn't enough. And now, it was over. Not because they admitted anything. Not because they apologized. But because I didn't need them to anymore. 3 years ago, I said quietly. You taught me something. She looked at me, her expression uncertain. I held her gaze. And for the first time, she didn't interrupt. She didn't argue. She just listened. Because now, she had no choice. For the first time in 3 years, she listened. No interruptions. No corrections. No cold, dismissive smile. Tiffany just stood there, holding the paper in her hands like it was something fragile, something that could disappear if she didn't grip it tightly enough. You said something to me. I continued quietly. In that courtroom? Her eyes flickered. She remembered. Of course she did. You told me that the weak have to accept the rules of the strong. The words settled into the space between us. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just returned. Tiffany's lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. For once, she didn't have anything to say, because now she understood those words didn't belong to her anymore. I held her gaze for a moment longer. Then I shook my head gently. I believed you back then, I said. I thought I had no choice. My voice didn't break. It didn't shake. I thought losing them meant I had lost everything. I glanced briefly at the empty chair where Christian had been sitting, then back at her. But I was wrong. That was the part she didn't expect. Because this wasn't about proving her wrong. It was about proving that I had changed. I didn't come back tonight to take revenge, I said. That wasn't entirely true. But it wasn't entirely false either. I came back because I don't need you anymore. The words felt lighter than I expected. Not sharp. Not heavy. Just final. Jennifer let out a quiet sob behind her. Courtney didn't move at all. Her eyes fixed somewhere distant, like she was trying to piece together a reality that no longer made sense. And Tiffany, she looked smaller. Not physically, but something about her had shifted. The authority she carried for so long was gone. Amber, she said finally, her voice softer than I had ever heard it. We can still fix this. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel the need to argue or prove anything. I just felt done. There's nothing left to fix, I said. Her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name. Regret. Fear. Maybe both. We're still family, she said again. But this time it sounded like a question, not a statement. I didn't answer it directly, because I didn't have to. Instead, I reached down and gently pushed the folder they had given me earlier back toward her. The one they wanted me to sign. The one that would have erased me completely. I think you should keep this, I said. My hand lingered on the edge of the table for a second. Then I let go. And that was it. No more arguments. No more explanations. No more waiting. I turned. Not quickly. Not dramatically. Just turned and started walking. Each step felt different than when I had walked in. Lighter. Steadier. The weight I had carried for 3 years wasn't gone. But it wasn't controlling me anymore. I reached the door and pushed it open. The cold air hit my face again. The same city. The same night. But everything felt different. Behind me, I could hear nothing. No one calling my name. No one trying to stop me. And that silence was the most peaceful thing I had felt in a long time. I stepped outside and paused for just a moment, looking up at the dark sky above the city lights. Mark and Ethan. I would see them again. Not as a fight. Not as a battle. But as their mother, the way it was always supposed to be. I took a breath. Slow. Steady. And then I walked forward. Not back. Not sideways. Forward. Because that's what this was really about. Not revenge. Not proving something to the people who broke me. But finally understanding I didn't need them to tell me who I was. I never did. And if you've ever been in a place where the people who were supposed to protect you were the ones who hurt you the most, if you've ever had to rebuild yourself in silence, piece by piece, while the world believed a version of you that wasn't true, then you already understand this. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do isn't to fight. It's to walk away and never look back. If this story meant something to you, I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to let go of people you thought would always be there? You can share your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, stories about truth, about standing back up when everything falls apart, stay here with me. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because sometimes, the moment you think everything is over, is exactly where something new begins. This story is fictionalized for dramatic effect.